Hello, I'm Michael McCarthy. I'm the environment editor of the Independent newspaper. You can see behind me in the office here, the production of tomorrow's Independent is going on at a pace. And I've got a particular interest in the Afro-Palearctic migrants, the birds that come from Africa every year, because last year I wrote a book about them and their decline. Here it is, giving it a shameless plug. It's called Say Goodbye to the Cuckoo. It's just come out in paperback. The point I made in the book was A, that they were declining, but B, that they had a huge value for us. Many of these birds, such as the turtle dove and the swallow and the nightingale, have a cultural resonance that goes back for thousands of years. And so if we lose them, we're not just losing species, which is bad enough, but we're losing something much more profound, really. We're losing a living announcement of the spring. The bird I want to talk about is the spotted flycatcher, Muscicapa striata. I have loved the spotted flycatcher ever since I was a boy, growing up in the Wirral Peninsula in Cheshire, where there was a moderate population of them. I think really it's the contrast between the bird's appearance, which is really it's an LBJ in birder-speak, it's a little brown jog. It's fairly nondescript brown plumage, and even its voice is fairly nondescript. It's just a very thin, reedy seep. But the contrast between that and somehow what you could only really call the bird's character, it is a sit-and-wait predator, is a technical term for it. And what it does is it sits on a perch and waits for flying insects to come past, and then it launches after them, almost like a peregrine falcon attacking a pigeon in miniature, in little explosions of activity, which are just a delight to watch. And one of the charming things about it also is that when it's launched into these sallies after passing butterflies or passing moths or hoverflies, and by the way, hoverflies look exactly like bees and wasps to us, but they don't look like bees and wasps to spotted flycatchers, and those spotted flycatchers will always batter a bee or a wasp on a pole to get rid of the sting. They will swallow the hoverfly instantly because they know what it is. But when they've launched themselves out into their little sallies after passing insects, they come back to the perch, to the same perch. And most birds, if you think about it, they leave a perch and they fly off, they fly away. But spotted flycatchers go out and come back, almost as if they're on a huge elastic band. And this jizz, if you like, makes it possible that you can identify them from 200, 300 yards away. You can see a spotted flycatcher going out and back. And they do it all day long, and they're utterly, utterly charming to watch. The spotted flycatchers suffered really worrying declines, and declines that are very upsetting for many people who love these birds and have lost them from their gardens. I think the breeding bird survey figures, if I remember rightly, were between 1994 and 1997. Spotted flycatcher populations went down by 59%. And if you take the long survey figures going back to the Common Bird Census from 1966 onwards, I think the comparison is something like it's about 82%. So we have just lost a major proportion of our spotted flycatchers has gone in the lifetime of an adult birder living today. And we don't really know why, because the habitat that spotted flycatchers prefer is basically the same, although it is certainly the case that there's been major insect decline in England and Wales as a result of intensive farming and the tide of pesticides that's washed over the land in the last 40 years. That may be a cause of it. But on the other hand, they do go right south of the Sahara, quite deep into Central Africa and even further south. And it's quite possible that they are suffering problems on their wintering grounds or on their migratory journeys. It's worth remembering what Ian Newton, Professor Ian Newton, Britain's greatest expert on migration, said, that migrants live in multiple jeopardy, and they can suffer problems on their non-breeding grounds in Africa, they can suffer problems on their migratory journeys, and they can also suffer problems here on their breeding grounds. And who knows, but perhaps the spotted flycatcher may be suffering from all three. It has to be said that this is a relatively new problem, or it may not be a new problem, but it has newly dawned upon us that the African migrants, the Afro-Palearctic migrants, are running into trouble. We've only known about it really for 3 or 4 years, but as someone who's taken a close interest in it, one of the things that I've found very heartening is the speed with which the ornithological establishment in Britain has responded to this and has reorientated its research strategies to take account of it. Now, we know a certain amount about what may be the problems for birds like the spotted flycatcher in England, such as insect decline, but we're very much in the dark about what their problems may be on their wintering grounds, or to be scientifically correct, their non-breeding grounds in Africa, on what may be happening to them in the winter in the tropical rain belt south of the Sahel. We need to do research out there, and the BTO has already started doing that, and it sends expeditions to Burkina Faso and to Ghana to look at what conditions are for birds like the tropical spotted flycatcher in the winter months. I actually wrote this book because I did not really think that there was a proper appreciation of just how much the migrant birds contributed to our lives, really. Just how much joy they brought to people by their announcement of the spring in arriving, by their songs and by their behaviour. I mean, people have been celebrating the nightingale, which comes back about the 15th of April, for 3,000 years. People have been celebrating the turtle dove since the Bible was written, about 900 BC. It's in the Song of Solomon. And of course, the cuckoo, which is in the book's title, is responsible for the oldest song in English, which is Summer is a Cook Coming In, written in 1250. And all of these birds add enormously to our culture. They add enormously to the meaning of life. They add enormously to the pleasure people take in the natural world. And all of them are threatened. Well, the swallow may be a bit less threatened, but most of the others are very threatened for reasons which may be far, far over the horizon. And this is really now one of the very highest research priorities in science in Britain. And if we want to keep the birds that I called our spring bringers in the book, I think we really need to make sure that research is intense, research does not slacken, and that research is properly funded. And you can help that by supporting the BTOs out of Africa up here.